Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabby Starr, president of Pomona College, and I am happy to welcome you to the first Inspire speaker event with our distinguished guest, Mr. John Urschel. This new speaker series is the result of a very special gift made by the Bro family. Kiki Bro, class of 9, was a neuroscience major while at Pomona, and today she works with her father, Pat Bro, to carry on the family spirit of innovation and vision. When her father began the Bro Company in the early 1970s in Denver, he started with a very small investment, but he had big dreams to revitalize communities and transform industries one transaction at a time. And today, through the Bro Foundation, they carry on that work. We are delighted that Kiki is here with us today, and we appreciate the Bro family and their dedication to Pomona. Their vision for this series is one that really resonates with me and with Pomona College's liberal arts mission. Quote, the Inspire Speaker Program brings to Pomona College non-traditional thinkers and doers who will inspire the Pomona community to contemplate how they might achieve their dreams and bear their added riches in their chosen fields. Our speaker today certainly fits this bill. John Urschel is the epitome of the scholar-athlete. He graduated from Penn State with a perfect 4.0 and a master's degree in mathematics, all in 4 years. As an undergraduate, he published papers in prestigious academic journals and taught undergraduate math classes, all while anchoring Penn State's offensive line and starting every game his junior and senior years. In 2013, John was the recipient of the Campbell Award, also known as the Academic Heisman, given to the college football player possessing the best combination of academics, community service, and on-field performance. He also won the Sullivan Award, given to the most outstanding amateur athlete in the United States, based on qualities of leadership, character, and sportsmanship. In 2014, the Baltimore Ravens drafted him in the 5th round and started him in several games during his rookie year. And in 2016, while playing for the Ravens, he was accepted to the doctoral program in mathematics at M.I.T. and for a while was both a full-time graduate student and an NFL player. He played 3 seasons for Baltimore, retiring in 2017 to focus on his graduate studies. As he works toward his doctorate, John continues to bear his added riches to students across the nation, inspiring young people to see the beauty and fun in STEM studies, applied mathematics, and problem solving. Tonight's conversation will be facilitated by Pomona College professor of mathematics, Amy Radenskaya, known as Professor Rad. Amy followed a non-traditional path herself to academia. She took a 10-year detour between high school and college to play cello and compose music. Following those gap years, she earned her BA from UC Berkeley and a PhD in mathematics from Stanford. In addition to her work at Pomona College, Amy is co-director of EDGE, Enhancing Diversity in Graduate Education, a national program designed to increase the number of women students successfully completing graduate programs in the mathematical sciences, and she's president of the EDGE Foundation. She's also president of the Association for Women in Mathematics, a nonprofit which encourages women and girls to study and to have active careers in the mathematical sciences and to promote equal opportunity and equal treatment of women and girls in the field. Amy is a fellow of the American Mathematical Society and a recipient of the Irvine Foundation Award for Distinguished Faculty Mentor and our own WIG Distinguished Professor Award for Excellence in Teaching. Please join me in welcoming these two inspiring leaders, John Urschel and Amy Radenskaya.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, President Starr, and thank you all for being here. I can't see a thing.
Yes, I actually can see no one.
It's totally weird. I'll have to look at you.
Okay, we'll just look at each other there. Yeah.
So this is really exciting for me. First of all, I feel like I'm Oprah, and that's a new one for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with one of my questions. So I love patterns. I've always loved patterns. It makes me really happy to think about them, to think what's going to happen to them, how they evolve, will they fall apart. And in my early career as a musician, I also love patterns. I mean, that's music, right? It's patterns evolving through time. So what about math do you really love, and how do you see that in football, if at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the thing that I truly love most about math is that it gives us this rigorous backdrop with which we can answer questions. and it's really a tool to know why. And this is sort of the thing that really drew me towards math, is not just being told that something works or being told that, this is how, it is, but to truly understand why and know what's going on. And math, I find, is very fundamental in that way.
But you work on networks and shapes and things.
I love
involving
the
networks.
hand movements.
So what is it that that tingling joy? Is there a particular math, maybe like your favorite thing at the moment that
My favorite
that you
thing
could
at the
sort
moment.
of describe to us?
Yeah, no. I'm hard-pressed to say one area of math is better than another, that, I'm hard-pressed to say that graph theory is more interesting than, say, dynamical systems or number theory, but I would say that graph theory is an area that's really captured me because it really is at the intersection of some highly theoretical things, and also it's so apparent in the world we live in.
So I saw online some interview you did.
The internet's a dangerous,
Internet's
a dangerous place.
But there you are talking about math, and then they superimposed these football players with arrows and vectors and forces. Like, do you really think that way on the field? Okay.
No. I'm pretty sure if I think that way on the field, I'm going to get killed. So, so that's dangerous.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to how you feel on the field in a minute, but just a little bit more about me.
Yeah.
No,
please. Let's.
Because this is the first time I'm doing this interview thing with I have met another NFL player who was a math PhD.
Oh, hold on.
Frank.
Hold on. There's only one other one. So hold on.
How
His
weird.
name is...
Rhymes with Bank Dian.
Yeah, Frank Ryan. Yeah, of course.
So
the quarterback, the Cleveland Browns.
I think so.
Yeah.
But so he was at Rice when I
want
was
you to know,
postdoc
any
there.
American mathematician. Never mind. I'm not going to finish that. Actually, I'm not finishing that sentence. Ignore what I was about to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I know that Frank
mouth.
Ryan, he would come in the math department now and then at Rice, and he actually used his mathematical skills to write a program that did some kind of statistical analyses of football. Is anything, do you see operations, research, or optimization stuff you use useful to football at all?
I find that right now, at least the state of sort of football with respect to using math is very much in its early stages. And in fact, the biggest things that are to be done in that field, in my opinion, a lot of it is not better techniques or better, mathematical technology, but doing a better job of convincing coaches to use it and that it's useful stuff. Because this is sort of a part of the equation that you can't ignore. Because it doesn't matter how good whatever your model is and how much it can help. If the coaches don't believe in it, it doesn't make a difference. So
they're hard to convince.
Yeah, they're as they should be, because as a football coach, you've done this all your life. You have instincts, you have feelings about what you should do in certain situations, and to be told by someone who perhaps has never played a down of football that no, this is wrong and you should do this other thing without being able to fully explain it to you, that's a lot of faith. So
you went to Penn State to
Yes.
play college football, basically, right? I mean,
and to go to school.
And to go to school.
Yeah, we do that at Penn State too.
So, there you are, you're a football player at college, and there is sort of a stereotype of the football guy as not being the brightest, maybe.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, except that I hear that linemen have the highest IQ on the team usually. But anyway, that's relative. So, there's a stereotype of the football jock, and How did those stereotypes follow you around, and how did you deal with that?
Give me a moment. I'm sorry. I would say that, especially people in mathematics, if they see me and meet me and hear about me without seeing my work, they're naturally skeptical. And as they should be. It's a reasonable thing, I understand. But the thing that I always did and the thing I always focused on was not worrying if people doubted me based off me being a football player or based off, the color of my skin or whatever it may be. If people are mildly skeptical of me, I can, just give me 50 minutes with them to give a talk or have them look at my work, and I believe that the things I do, I hope the things I do speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
No.
I,
Tell me.
I'm going to come back to that. I just love your confidence in yourself, and earlier today, you were talking about how you love things being really hard.
Yes.
And that's fun.
Yes.
If you think you might not be able to do it, that's fun.
Yes.
But not everyone feels that way, and so
No.
you played a sport where it's good to be tough and to knock people down, and often the mathematicians, they say we need grit, we need a thick skin. How could you guide a young person who maybe doesn't have that naturally, but still wants to do mathematics? They don't have
that is not a necessary condition to do mathematics. This is sort of one of my characteristics, is that I don't mind failing. Like I'm okay with that, because I feel that if I go through life in whatever respect it may be, sort of challenging myself in some way, if I never sort of fail mathematically, then I know I did not challenge myself enough mathematically. Either that, or I'm the smartest mathematician who's ever lived, which one or the two. So I'm going to say probably the former. And so I would say, especially if you're sort of concerned about failure, it's okay to sort of, you don't have to go all in on things. In fact, as a young mathematician, I recommend you sort of try to work on smaller projects first, sort of low-hanging fruit, things that you think you're almost certain you can do. And this gives you experience, it warms you up, and eventually you can be more ambitious. But I would highly recommend, as a mathematician, at some point, trying to be a little ambitious, because if you never sort of if you never take any risks and any sort of leaps as a mathematician, you're never going to sort of fully know your worth or your limitations.
And I think one of my professors in grad school said you should always have the hard, impossible problem kind of that you're working on for years, but then also have these easier things, as you mentioned.
That's absolutely right. And I'm no exception to that.
For me, what was really useful as a grad student was writing solutions for my calculus class. like I can do these. That's taking it to extreme. But I do
and
think,
also, one more thing, do not mistake sort of this approach and this thought process for some unreasonable level of confidence in myself. I would say I'm actually not that confident in myself at all. I tend to be on the pessimistic side of what I can and can't do, but I'm always trying things I think I can't do, and I like to be pleasantly surprised. And I guess I'm just very comfortable at failing or being wrong or things not going well.
That is a big thing these days. They call it a growth mindset. I'm going to try something. Even if I can't do it right away, I'll figure out how to do it. That's sort of a mindset. And I think that's important. It's also, they've done some research that show that synapses are grown when you make mistakes, especially if you admit that you made a mistake.
Then I have many of them.
And that's why you're so smart, probably.
It must be why, yes.
So just to switch it up a little bit, people of color often talk about needing to switch back and forth between cultural norms of two different worlds, or code shifting, code switching.
Code switching?
Code switching. Like, so you have a code of conduct or a norm in one world and a different one.
Like binary to ternary?
Yeah, so this is lingo. So some of these questions people send in, so they use different lingo than we do. So code switching, not like binary code.
Noted.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
So do you think you felt this especially acutely as, having to go from the football field to M.I.T. to your family life?
No, I think I'm the same person in all aspects of my life because, I'm really bad at pretending. I'm serious. I'm very, very bad at pretending to be someone different than I am, pretending to like things I don't, pretending to not like things I do, and
I think that's a great example for us.
Maybe not. My fiance might disagree with that because, pretending to like people you don't is a good skill. That's true.
In some of the interviews you've given, you've mentioned mentors that you've had, both in mathematics and in football, and you talk about how A.Q. Shipley made you feel like you belonged to the team when you didn't quite feel like you belonged at first. How important is mentoring in your life, and are you currently mentoring other people?
I would say the first thing is with respect to sort of the A.Q. Shipley comment. When I say belonging, I mean it in a different sense than perhaps you're sort of perceiving it as. When I mean by belonging, I mean sort of helping me fit in as an NFL player, namely helping me sort of be the player I needed to be so that I could fit in terms of a talent level and performance level, and not anything sort of socially, but in terms of just performance. I've had many great mentors over the years. A.Q. certainly helped me out when I was a young professional football player. A mathematician, the first mathematician who introduced me to mathematical research, Vadim Koloshin. Without him, I'm not sure I would be a mathematician. Before him, I didn't even know what a mathematician was or what they did. I didn't even know what mathematical research was. And then other sort of researchers, like, for example, my longtime collaborator, Ludmil Zikatanov. If it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd be. I'd probably be working in dynamical systems. So
Not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, but
That's what I do. But.
Not a bad thing, but that's, I'd be somewhere very different, probably. Yeah.
And do you actively seek to play a mentoring role right now?
Yes, you asked me that too. I do. I'm involved with a lot of outreach in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to sort of high school and middle school kids. And then, any undergrads at M.I.T., I'm always happy to do things with them. I'm involved in some directed reading programs with undergrads.
Do they have an Association of Women in Mathematics student chapter at MIT? And maybe you could start one if they don't have one.
I don't know. That's a good. I'm actually uncertain.
So I want you to go back and because I think I am on the sort of diversity committee at probably
MIT
because
now.
you're a black person. You're on.
Because I'm a football player.
Oh, because you're a football player.
Yes, almost though.
Yeah.
Almost.
Because I do have a few friends, women friends who've gone to MIT and
like
in
who?
math.
In math?
Well,
like who?
Mary Lou Zeman, she's way before your time.
Okay.
But she was a postdoc there.
Yeah.
So after grad school, she went, and she just had a terrible time.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? MIT math is the best.
I know you think that, and you say you're so happy there and everything.
Happiest I've ever been in my life.
But how many women have you seen there at MIT?
MIT Math?
Yeah.
Many. There's a lot of women PhD students. There's at least 12. At least 12.
So
I should no. See, MIT Math is going to get mad at me now. Now I gotta bump this number up. I'm lowball. Note that I'm lowballing because I don't want to be wrong. I am going to say 24.
Okay. Well, we'll fact check later.
Yes, fact check me later. Yes.
But I'm just going to encourage you when you go back to
Yes.
go say, hey, do you have a AWM student chapter?
Okay.
And I want to help. Because you are so, even though you don't feel confident you saying that, but you exude this comfort in your own skin and in your own, self. And I think you'd make a great mentor.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So just push it.
Okay.
So I have also read that your parents had a pretty big influence on your interests, both in math and football. And in fact, your father retired from his job when you were a teenager in order to spend more time with you. Is that right? Or to help out? No?
My father did retire he was a thoracic surgeon. He retired when I was a teenager.
But maybe not for that reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you're a new father.
Yes, I am. That's true.
And
I
you
have a little one.
And a little girl.
She's not even crawling around yet. She can roll. So she's rolling around now.
Mm-hmm. So what kinds of support do you see yourself giving her, as she grows? And are you going to play chess with her? Are you going to?
I'm actually going to keep her away from chess.
Really?
For the early sort of stages of her life, because chess is a great game, but it is a game, and many smart people go down rabbit holes very quickly with chess. So I want to sort of, especially if she has any of my characteristics, she will probably be very, what's the word? Obsessive. So, yeah. But no, I think they say half of being a parent, or maybe half of being a father, is just showing up. Mm-hmm. So I will always be sure to show up, always be sure to be there for her and let her know that I love her, no matter what she does. So, do you have any tips? Do you have any?
I just want to say that my dad, be careful. I wanted to do everything my dad did. He played the cello, I played the cello. Mm-hmm. He did math, I wanted to do math. I wanted to go with him to his office, and so.
Oh, she will be there.
I think that was a really good thing, actually, because I turned out great. But I just, I want to encourage you to think of your daughter as your friend and your colleague later. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Only if she wants to be.
If she wants to be.
Yeah, I will never sort of push math on her, but if she's interested, of course I'm a resource for her, and of course I'm going to help her.
And what if she wants to play football or rugby or?
No, I will. I'll fully support her if she wants to play rugby.
We're going to come back to
okay.
Question on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you are at least a double superstar, right? You're an NFL player. You're a grad student at MIT. That's, not many people do either of those things. You're in the notices of the AMS. You're on 60 Minutes. You're famous. Let's face it. You're here with me.
That's true. That's
famous.
True. That is true.
You're also very personable. And so.
Really? Can I? Will you go on record saying that? Can I tell other people that you said that?
You know how you just said it's good to say nice things.
That's true. That's true.
So, but how does it feel for so many people to expect so much from you? And is there something particular you want to achieve from this position? You're in this totally unique position of being able to do something.
I simultaneously feel no pressure that, because, people look at me and expect certain things from me, I feel no pressure to do things because people expect them of me. I've never cared about that, and I never will. But simultaneously, I'm very aware of the position I'm in, and I believe morally it's very important for me to use this position for good. And so, yes, both those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
Snaps.
I don't know if that deserves.
But is there something, a particular next step or project you're interested in?
Mathematically?
Or like as far as this doing good kind of thing?
Yes, so.
I know you want to talk about math, but you did that already earlier today.
That's true. So I do believe that I try to do good in my local community through math to, high school level kids, middle school level kids from underserved backgrounds. I try to be a great mentor to younger mathematicians, whether they be undergrads or younger grad students. I also think that how I carry myself and what I do in my career also sets an example. Yes.
Absolutely. So let's go back to when I asked about your daughter playing football and all of that. So when you retired, just before you retired, this study came out about CTE and all that. So how do you see the sport of football changing over the next 10, 20 years in response to this growing body of research regarding chronic, traumatic encephalopathy?
I'm not sure it's going to change too much. I mean, the game has gotten safer I think the biggest way it's going to change is through sort of better awareness about player health and better treatment and better awareness about when a player sort of needs to be pulled from a game, when a player needs to be pulled from practice, when, how players need to be handled. But at a fundamental level, I don't think sort of the way football is played can change. Perhaps some of the plays that are extremely, dangerous, they can sort of try to remove, they can change the rules to make it slightly safer, and they have, and they will. But I think at a fundamental level, you can't take out the contact and sort of physicality of football.
So when you retired, was it that you wanted more time to do math, or that you thought you might not be able to do math if you played more? It
was, one, yes, it's nice to have more time to do math. And two, you start to think about sort of focusing on family and longevity when you have a kid. And so more than anything, the things in life I was most excited about were math-related. And sort of math-related and related to my child.
Yeah, I think I would have acted the same way. Anything else you want to say about the head injury stuff?
I don't know. What else should I mean?
Are you going to donate your brain?
Donate my brain? That's dangerous. I think that's a very dangerous thing, like me thinking of people looking in that thing. I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Well, you won't be around.
That's true. That's true. I might I might keep. Well, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Oh.
Okay. Well, moving along. So
Are you like trying to like put dibs on it? Is this?
No, I thought it was interesting, that study of all those guys' brains. They must have given the okay ahead of time.
Or I think their families, maybe.
Oh.
Yeah, their families. Oh.
So, and just think, because it's a weird thing to think about, right? I'm going to give, just like your reaction.
Yeah, well, I think usually
like,
when...
I don't want people looking my head like that, right?
But I think that, and that's also one of the things, I mean, I'm not really trying to talk, but there's definitely, I mean, and I think they address it, but there's definitely some self-selection bias going on. Mm-hmm. Because you do ask yourself, wait, who's donating, what makes you want to, so.
Yeah. So this is maybe a stickier one. I don't know. The
Ooh, it's
NFL.
sticky?
The NFL has been in
Right.
the press a lot regarding the Take a Knee anti-racism protests that were started by Colin Kaepernick.
Yes.
How do you feel about NFL players using their position to bring light to the unequal treatment of people of color in the U.S.? And is this an appropriate use of their popularity in our culture?
I feel like you claimed that was sticky, but you definitely gave me the, how can I put this? You gave me like the underhand pitch version of that question. I really think so. So I'm going to be appreciative that you gave me the underhand version, and I'm going to, that you gave me a very easy version of that question. And I would say, yes, of course, I think as professional athletes, we have this podium, we have this platform, and of course, it's their right to be able to sort of use that platform as they see fit in sort of what they want to sort of champion and what they want to bring attention to. And I'll say you definitely gave me the underhand version because you didn't ask me, is it appropriate for them to do it, during a football game? Is it, appropriate? Is it disrespectful of the anthem? These are not any questions you asked me, so.
But you can answer them.
Oh no, it's now that you asked the question, those other ones are off the table. But you definitely gave me the easy version, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
So all today you've insisted that you want to talk to students. You don't really like talking to other people. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how that makes me feel, but why do you like talking to students so much?
Because I like being a tool for young people to sort of help them in their learning process. Like, that's something I truly believe in, and that's my passion. Amongst other things, I want to solve hard problems, but I also want to help bring along the next generation, and so I always have time for students. But sometimes adults, not as much.
And I was sort of thinking you might see yourself in those students in some ways, and I wondered, what do you seek in someone teaching you?
Are
you done with that teaching?
I don't know. I'm not sure you should ever be done with it.
Right.
But I'm not sure I really look for teachers, but when I find them, I sort of know this is, and you can bring different things, but you just sort of know. But this is not something I sort of look for anymore, really.
So I think we're good to, I've gone through all my questions. Is there something you want to say? Or we could also have some questions from the audience, I think.
You're done with me? It's time to give the audience their.
Yeah, because I think
that's what you're.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, let's see what questions you guys have for me, and if at all possible, while you guys have questions, maybe you can make it a little more visible for us, so we can see who's asking.
And introduce yourself first, yeah.
If at all possible.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nilda, and I am a staff member here at Pomona College. And my question for you is, what do you think your future would have been if you had stayed playing in the NFL?
What my future would have been? Same future, I think. Regardless, I would retire at some point. I would focus on math, and math is like my life's number one passion, and I'd be a math professor eventually. I think almost the same track, just maybe bump back a little bit. Yes.
Hi, my name is Nick Beatty. I'm a senior neuroscience major at Pomona. My question is, So how did you first get into football, and what kinds of changes should we be focusing on specifically in youth football in order to make it safer and also to preserve the future of the game?
Okay, great question. So my first introduction to football when I was little, when I would go visit my father in Canada, he had this office in his house, and in his office, sort of on the wall containing the door, sort of opposite the computer, there was a photo of him, a framed photo of him in his football pads. And I would always see it when I was little, and that would always make me want to play football. And so I started playing football when I was in 9th grade, and I fell in love with it as a, in a sort of very aggressive teenager who loves physical contact. And it's been a beautiful game for me, and the game's given me so much. And that's sort of how I got introduced to football, and I'm better for it. With respect to youth football, I am actually a firm believer in that tackle football should not necessarily happen at extremely young ages. This is my personal belief. Everyone has their opinion, but a lot of people make a big deal out of professional athletes and brain damage. But really, I think maybe the main thing we should be talking about is youth football and what, 8, 9-year-olds go through in Pop Warner when their brains aren't fully developed, when their bodies aren't fully physically developed. And for example, if I had a son, I'd let him play football, but probably not before 7th, 8th, or 9th grade. So, I mean, there's 7-on-7, there's many things, and I think if you start tackle football slightly later, you're not at any true disadvantage.
Hi, John. I'd like to thank you for your candor and insightfulness and making us laugh a little bit.
Was I insightful?
Yeah, you were.
I appreciate that.
My name is Rolando Talbot. I'm the Director of Project Management here at Pomona College. And my question is, oftentimes when I'm dealing with students,
I can't see you fully. Did we meet outside?
Yes, we did. Real briefly.
Yes, I'm sorry we couldn't have talked for
No,
longer
that's-
outside. I'm
let's
telling
talk
you,
now.
the person would have, yes, they would have been
We'll have that conversation now.
less than pleased with me if I was late.
Yeah, no worries. So as staff members here at Pomona College, oftentimes we have the opportunity of working with students, and oftentimes, at least in my experience, we get into these conversations where they're torn between two passions.
Yes.
We have these very analytical conversations about the right path, but there's this emotional aspect of it too. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to share as much as you would like to, kind of the emotional aspect that you went through making that decision to leave the NFL and pursue math, and kind of what lessons or maybe advice you can offer to students that might be in similar situations.
That's a great question. Give me 30 seconds. The way I go through sort of thinking about a problem or thinking about some decision might not be the best way for everyone to go through it, but I'm an analytical person, so I tend to think about things somewhat analytically, and I would say this is how I make just about every major decision. And sometimes I try to sort of let feelings stay out of it, because feelings change, but sort of facts and information, if they're solid, do not. And when I really thought about it, when I sat down and weighed all my options and thought about the things that were most important to me in my life, the things that mattered to me, where I was sort of at this stage in my life with respect to math, with respect to football, with respect to my family, with respect to finances, it felt like the right decision for me. And this was very much not a emotional decision, but a quantitative decision. And most of my decisions are like that, although maybe I'm not sure how this is how everyone should make decisions. I hope that's a decent answer.
Well, when we can look inside your brain later, we'll maybe figure out more how that emotion and the analytical part, because surely there's an emotional.
I try to leave it out of it.
You don't like to talk about it, I think.
Talk about what? Emotion?
Maybe.
I
don't know.
No, we can
I
talk
just
emotion.
met you today. I don't know.
Yeah, what do you want to talk? Let's talk about some feelings. What's on your mind? No. We can talk about some.
Hello. Hi, John.
Okay. This is the
Thank you
answer.
so much for spending the day with us to share your thoughts on mathematics and life in general. My question is sort of related to the take a knee question. I wanted to know your feelings, your emotions, your opinion on whether or not Colin Kaepernick will ever get signed to a team. And I mean, you can answer this sort of, analytically. Is he still good enough to be signed to a team?
No.
Is this strictly a political? Is it strictly political why he's not being signed to a team? And if he is signed to a team, what team do you think would take him?
So I have to admit, I have not been following football the closest in the past couple months, but my guess is going to be no. He is not going to get signed to a team. I think if he, okay, hold on. Let me think about that for a second.
You get 15 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, once this, if, no, if there's a point at which he's less in the spotlight, perhaps an NFL team might be more open to it. But I'm skeptical, although I'm not an expert on quarterback play, I'm not an expert on quarterback ability, but I think if it was not for his off the field, whatever you want to call it, I'd like to think that he would have been signed to a team. But again, I also don't know what him and his agent are sort of, what their baseline is for acceptable salary. So that could play a part as well, which I don't know. But conditional on them, being reasonable, there's no way that he should not be on an NFL team, which I think is obvious to most people.
Okay. Hi. I am Candace Price, a math professor at the University of San Diego. And so my question is about balance. So I'm wondering how you balanced being a graduate student while playing for the NFL and how that has translated into balance now as a father.
Yes.
And also still a graduate student giving talks places, talking about your research, doing your research. So I'm just wondering about your balance and techniques that you use.
Yes, so I'm either a very good example of balance or a very bad one. And you can be the judge based off what I'm about to tell you. So the reason why I think I was well sort of equipped to do these two things was solely based off the fact that these were two of my favorite things in the world. These were actually my two favorite things in the world to do. And I'm extremely obsessive. And in fact, this balance came very much out of a sort of lack of balance in my life. And the fact that these two things were the only things I really wanted to do all day, every day. And these were the things that consumed me. Actually consumed me. And this is all I would think about. This is all I'd do. And this is, it wasn't football and math, but it was two things that perhaps I wasn't unreasonably passionate about, I doubt I would have been able to do what I did. So it had everything to do with how much I loved the two things I was doing, and less with my abilities for time management or anything of the sort. I would say that it's always easier to find time to do something when it's your favorite thing. At least if you have my personality.
We actually have some time for a few more questions.
Yes? You have a question?
Hi, my name is Faika. It's an honor to meet you. An extraordinary person, sportsman, mathematician, very impressive. I have a question about machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I read about you that you're involved with some machine learning stuff.
Yes.
So as we all know, artificial intelligence is like a multi-dollar company which is not being regulated at the moment. And we have people like Elon Musk worried about the future of humanity. And I discussed it with some of my friends who are doing artificial intelligence. And what I got to know is like the singularity can happen in 2030 because there is not a very good understanding of mathematics behind AI by coders. And the mathematicians are not very well aware of what coders are coding. Do you think that's true? And if that's true, you being at MIT, where all the top-level research takes place, is anything being done to bridge that gap between coders and mathematicians to avoid machines taking over humans in 2030?
Crowd, don't do that to me. Don't. So you're supposed to be with me on this. Don't do that to me. So I want to make sure I got the back end of that question, which is the gap between sort of mathematicians and people coding AI. And yes, there is a very big gap. First of all, I'm going to say AI and machine learning are not synonyms, but I'm going to take that question in the framework of machine learning, if that's okay. Yes, there's a big gap between, say, what we use in terms of code for, say, so-called deep learning or artificial neural networks, and what we can explain mathematically. But, and 2030 is soon, but me personally, I'm skeptical of 2030. And I would say that, like anything, sort of machine learning and mathematics is a tool. This can be used for good or bad, and a computer or an artificial unit is not sort of, how should I put this? I don't believe that, I fundamentally don't believe that a computer is smart or stupid. A computer is only as smart or stupid as a smart or stupid person using it. And so, by the nature of computers, sort of all these machine learning algorithms or applications will never do anything that we did not tell it to do. And so I believe that if, something bad happens with respect to machine learning, who did it? We did. So that's my thought process. Yeah.
Is there a lot of collaboration at MIT? MIT seems like a place where they do sort of talk across that aisle of theory and building things with the, what do they call that? The MIT lab.
Yeah, so I would actually say that MIT, I don't know, maybe some people make it, I think there are some places that are very much more on the cutting edge of sort of deep neural nets, and I would not consider this one of the great expertises of MIT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in my opinion. We do a lot of really great machine learning stuff. I don't think we're like world cutting edge with respect to deep nets. In fact, I think the majority of cutting edge places are very commercial.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean,
Really?
the salaries are much better. So.
Elon Musk was, yeah.
Yes.
Other questions?
Other questions? Any questions you may have? Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you. My name is Wendy, and I have a son who is almost 9, and he's very good in mathematics. And I just wanted your advice as far as what you would recommend to a young student and a young person who would go forward in math, and just what advice you would give to that person who also would like to play sports. So a balance for a young person with schooling and everything.
I would, yeah. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I would say that, no matter what you do, I think sports are an amazing thing, whether it's actually physical sports or a club or some group, because there's something to be said for sort of being a part of a team. And that sort of feeling is something that I think everyone should experience in some way, shape, or form, because it's a really amazing thing. And then with respect to sort of a young, aspiring math person, I would say don't fall into the trap of judging sort of yourself and your mathematical progress by the people around you. Because sort of sometimes just judging yourself based off the classroom you're in can lead to some sort of complacency. And I would always tell you to try to challenge yourself and grow and improve with respect to learning. The key thing is to you have to love to learn. And I'd say the best resource for a young, budding mathematician would be, you said 9 years old? So have you heard of Math Counts? Okay, so Math Counts is this program for middle schoolers where it's like a math competition. They get a booklet, it's full of a bunch of math problems, and you try to do as many as you can in a certain amount of time and get as many right as you can. And I think it would be a great resource for him. You can go online, you can find practice exams, you can find old exams from different years, and just print them out and go to town on them. And this is like a really, really fun thing that can really challenge a young person. And if those are too easy, then jump from Math Counts to Math Olympiad questions. And if those are too easy, then do some Putnam
Go to
ones.
M.I.T.
Go to Putnam. Find old Putnam. I mean, and this is something I do to this day. So sometimes myself and my office mate, who is my best friend at MIT, sometimes when we're getting a little tired of working on our research or thinking about things, we'll just play a game where one of us picks a random year just based off, I don't know, some event or something. We pick a random year, and then we pick a random problem from that year's Putnam exam, and we try to solve it as fast as we can. And we do this for fun, and I think it's important to sort of keep that growth learning mindset, because without it, I think you're very much going to limit yourself as a scientist. Yeah, of course.
You brought up something, though, that I just want to follow up on,
Yes.
which is that you do this with your best friend,
Yes,
as
that's
a
true.
game with your friend.
Yes.
You like sports, kids to play sports because they're part of a team.
Yes.
And I think we have a notion sometimes that mathematics is a solitary thing, and it's not. It's so much fun to do it with other people,
Yes, that is true.
right?
That is true.
And we
It's-
don't know that. So if find friends who also like to
Yes.
do math and have fun with them.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Carl Nicholson. I'm a Claremont resident. And I had a question. You mentioned that you're studying graph theory.
Yes.
And I'd be interested to see where you would like to apply your graph theory to what type of problems and at what level.
So where I like being as a mathematician is I consider myself what I would call a pure applied mathematician. I like solving problems in graph theory that have no application, but I also like solving problems in graph theory or machine learning that do have applications, but I like thinking about them in a way that the results I produce and the things that I do have a level of generality that it's useful for a wide range of applications, ones that we know and ones that we haven't even come up with yet. So I actually, in my work, I very rarely work on something and say, I'm doing this to solve this problem for X application. In fact, I'm not sure this has ever happened in my career. However, I've done things that have applications in sort of machine learning subset selection problem and the many applications with that, machine learning unsupervised learning, the many applications of that, numerical methods for computing minimal eigenpairs of elliptic sort of linear operators, and the many, sort of applications of that, but I've never sort of worked on a problem because of one application, or working on a problem with respect to one application. And I think that's sort of my sort of niche with respect to research, sort of on the pure to applied spectrum. Yeah. Yes?
Hi, my name is Helen, and I'm an undergraduate student at Pomona College. I'm a math major.
What year?
I'm a sophomore. And I'm wondering, what in your life brings you the most fulfillment? Like, what drives you to do what you do?
What in life brings me the most fulfillment? So...
Sounds a little emotional.
Wow. I would say... I think a lot of mathematicians would say sort of the moment when you solve a problem that you've been working on for many months or years. And I would say it's, in fact, for me, the most fulfilling is the moment when I'm working on a problem that maybe I've been working on for many months or many years. And the sort of uncertainty of will I solve it, won't I solve it, and this challenge of me constantly fighting against the unknown. And the feeling of the process is something that I very much love. And I'd say this is very, very fulfilling to me. More so than, the actual result. Although, of course, I'm happy when I've, managed to solve something, I've managed to prove something, I've managed to uncover something, but I really love the process. And without the process, I think I'd be much less happy.
You like the struggle.
I like the struggle.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, go for it. Oh,
No, then nobody.
never mind. Sorry. No, I don't. Do you know?
Hello.
You want me to
Thank you so much for your talk. I guess I had just kind of a general question about identity, because in my mind, it seems as if math and D1 football at a very competitive school is kind of contradictory. So I'm wondering if you felt more like a mathematician that played football or a football player that did math, and whether you felt one or the other ever at times made you feel like you had to conform to being entirely a mathematician or entirely a football player, and how the communities you were in at school kind of shaped your perception of one or the other.
Okay. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about my sort of identity. Again, I think this goes back to the fact that in my life, I've never really been sort of governed by like how I view other people viewing me, or how I sort of have concern with other people's thoughts of me. But I would say mostly I love what I do, and I really enjoy doing things that I love. And I don't tend to think about my identity with respect to some archetype or some set sort of characteristic that might be, something common in, popular culture. I recognize that I have many interests, I have many things I like, and I like doing the things that I like. And yes, being around football players, you sort of get in a football mindset. Being around mathematicians, you get in a math mindset. But at the end of the day, I think I don't view myself as one thing or the other. I very much view myself as someone who likes to do the things they enjoy. And those, have been football and math.
Question? We have a question over here.
Yes?
Hi, my name is Danielle Walker. I was invited by the NAAC chapter in Pomona. The question that I have for you is, number one, thank you for speaking with all of us. I think you have a great character. I really admire a lot of the things that you said up on stage. My question is to you. You mentioned that you are okay with failure. You're okay with failing. What advice do you have for a lot of the younger children, the youth growing up, who are oftentimes trying to fit in certain categories because of social media, stuff like that. What advice do you have for them about perseverance and what it takes to overcome trials and tribulations?
Yes. That is a very good question, and I hope I have an equally good answer, but I'm skeptical, so give me a second. I would say, at least in my experience with respect to struggle, it is a certainty that you will go through struggle in your life. This is a certainty. And in fact, another certainty is that when you go through great struggle in your life, this will shape you and shape who you are as a person and will shape your trajectory, the trajectory of your life. And it can go one of two ways. You can either sort of recognize the moment that you're in and face it head on and face this challenge and embrace it, or you can let it crush you and break you. And the fact of the matter is, when you're faced with some challenge, like we all will be and we all have been, no matter what you do, it is going to shape your life and shape who you are. The only choice you have is how it shapes you. And that's a decision that, you have to make. And I'm not saying it's easy, but that's always been my thought process. Was that a decent answer?
It was okay.
It was okay. Yeah, that's true.
It was great.
Yeah, but that's always been my process. That's always been my thought process. Yeah, this has always been the way I've thought about these things, is that, you're faced with these sort of defining moments, and you can either embrace them or you can just sort of crumble and let them, break you. So, this is okay. I mean, everyone crumbles sometimes too. Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to follow up on that when you talk about these defining moments. Sometimes I can imagine for many of us it's hard to relate to a fifth-round draft pick in the NFL who's now a graduate student at MIT. But you also mentioned that you didn't start football till you were in 9th grade, which is a little late for some sports, and you didn't really have the math bug until it sounded like college.
Yes, that's right.
Can you kind of point to some of these defining struggle moments in your own life? So maybe some of us can feel a little better about ourselves.
Can I ask a first question to Pomona people? Is this recorded? Yes, okay, good to know. All right, so that will limit the struggles I talk about. No, I mean, it's true. I'm comfortable talking with you guys, but, internet. I would say one of the sort of biggest struggles that I face that I openly talk about is my junior year of undergrad. My mother actually lost her job. So my mother, single parent, raised me. She lost her job and she couldn't find work. And in fact, she couldn't pay rent. And so she ended up being more or less homeless, not homeless, but, without an actual home, and she had to go stay with family friends because she didn't have a job and she couldn't find work. And so I would say that's been one of sort of a struggle I faced, sort of this question of, at the time I really wanted to just get my undergrad. I was due to sort of graduate in my third year and sort of just stop football, stop, higher level math, and go get a job to try to help. And so that was something I faced. That was, I'd say, one defining moment, you could say. No, I was just worried about helping my mom more than anything. I mean, I was considering the fact of, how do I deal with this? What do I do? How do I help? But I came to the sort of realization that, I need to stay the course and that this is going to work out.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I'm a junior physics major here.
Yeah?
So this might be an easier or harder question depending, but I was wondering if you think math is a human-made construction and an invention, or do you think it was a discovery and that given another species, we would always find the same math that we have today?
So here's the first problem is I'm not an expert in sort of this philosophical area, but I'm going to tell you my opinion with the caveat that it could be extremely wrong. And my opinion is yes, math is a human-made construction that has been produced to cope with the world we live in, and it very much came out of the physical world and our interaction with it. But at the same time, if we came across, say, a different, like race of, whatever, I would suppose it would actually be extremely likely that we would have the exact same math system, maybe just in a different, different language and a different guise. Because for them, math would again just be a language to sort of cope with and deal with quantitatively the world they live in, which happens to be the same, universe. So that's my opinion. So.
But there might be, creatures living in higher dimensions or something, and then they might.
Yeah, they might be better. They might be better at math than us. That's very true. Creatures living in higher dimensions.
Or what thing? Like I was saying, well, counting is something we do and that we build on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But are there universes where, I might count this thing and then it would all of a sudden become two things? So I'm going to answer definitely a human construct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree it is a human construct. Yeah.
Okay, I think I messed up the Q&A.
No, no.
Any more questions?
No more questions?
So.
Oh, one more.
Oh, okay. I can't see anything.
There's like 3
Oh, there's more.
I just can't see.
Yeah, we've got a couple more.
Thanks. Hi, thanks for speaking here.
Yes.
And, my name's Joe, and I'm originally from New England, so we're glad that you're in the right state after being in Maryland the wrong state, I should say. so welcome to Massachusetts.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
But I wonder about, there's a misperception, I think, regarding football players in general. Clearly, it's a physical sport, it's an emotional sport, but it's also a thinking sport, very much a thinking man's sport. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, your experience, both at the collegiate level and then professionally.
Yes, I would say it's sort of a big misconception to say that football players just do football and they have nothing else. I would say that, football players, just like anyone in the population, are complex. They have many interests. Mine happen to be math. For some of my teammates, it could be fishing, it could be hunting, it could be
crochet,
working on cars. It could be wood sculpting. These are all actual examples. Crocheting is not one I've come across, but this is plausible. This is possible. Yes, and also I'd say, especially at the levels that I've been able to play football, like, in college and at the pro level, you don't get to that sort of level without having either supreme dedication or supreme talent or both. And if you have sort of this dedication, typically this shows up in other parts of your life. And this is not a compartmentalized thing.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap, okay?
Yes, in the back.
We've got our 2 questions.
Oh, you have? Sorry.
Okay. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. My name is Dominique Walker. My twin sister actually just asked you a question about perseverance for youth. You all might have thought you saw her over there. But I had a little bit of a personal question for you, if you don't mind talking personal about your life. You mentioned something about your father living in Canada. So I wanted to know, you wanting to make sure that you show up for your daughter's life, making sure that you're there, taking a step aside from your professional life to be there for your family. Did that have anything to do with your upbringing? And is that why you are so strong-headed as far as doing what you're going to do for yourself, because maybe you didn't have something that you needed somewhere else, without really kind of saying that? But you know what I mean. I know you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you don't even have to answer anything else. So
Yes.
I got it right there.
I'm gonna end that on a yes, if that's okay. Yeah. No. Yes. I will. The single most important thing to me in this world is being a good father for my daughter, and nothing comes before that. So, no, there's no need to. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. So.
Hi, my name is Callie, and I'm a senior at Pomona. I'm still kind of formulating my question, but Dr. Rad talked about women in math, and you mentioned that you were part of diversity groups at M.I.T., and I was just kind of wondering if you could speak on the importance of diversity in math, and also what you think is necessary for making space for people who may not feel comfortable in certain, I guess, spaces in the math world that are more, I don't know.
White male dominated?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So, first of all, it's true. There's not many African American mathematicians. In fact, if you look at all the top math universities, I don't think you'll find a single African American math professor. And don't look at a math department that has an African American math professor and then say, John, now that must mean John means they're not elite. But what I'm saying is, if you look at a lot of top math, programs, they don't have any African American mathematicians. And maybe I'm naive, but I don't believe this is because they have some strong bias against them, or they have some sort of sentiment that we don't want these types of people here. I personally believe that's ridiculous. Perhaps I'm naive, but this is what I think. And so logically, this leaves me, logically, also, I simultaneously believe that there aren't like a significantly larger percentage of genius Caucasian American babies being born in the United States than African American babies. I think that's also a ridiculous concept. And so that leaves me logically with the sort of thought process that there is something that happens between when, that baby is born to the point where they become developed, where something about their environment, something about their upbringing, something about society sort of fails and loses these young, brilliant minds that I don't know what this process is. I don't know why it is, but I do believe that this is done long before, these people reach the point where they're applying to sort of become professors at top universities. And I don't think top universities aren't hiring. I believe if there was good enough talent, whether they're African or American or not, top math universities would hire them. And the fact that there are none shows a lack of sufficient talent in their opinion. And I don't believe that is something that happens from birth.
So you're saying there's something in the pipeline?
There's something in the pipeline. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is this is my logical reasoning.
And do you think there are concrete steps that we could take to, because I think there are, but.
Well, now you have to tell me what steps you think there are.
One thing is supporting organizations that mentor African American students, other underrepresented students, and by supporting, getting the NSF to put money into them, getting people to put energy into them.
I think.
I think doing what you're doing is going to help, because there's going to be, a black person there that young folks can go, oh, I could do it. I can do it, right?
I think
Having
part
role
of it
models.
is just sort of the more that do it, the more this sort of may change, I hope. And yes, I think, these programs I think are good. Yeah, these programs sort of, mentoring young African Americans.
And I think that when you say it's not a conscious decision to not hire an African American, that's probably true, but I think there's quite a bit of evidence of bias in publishing. If there's a name on a paper that looks very African American, there's some studies that show this. I know you don't want to believe it.
I'm going to claim strong skepticism that say perhaps this does exist to some extent, but let me say for instance, the Journal of the American Math Society, I'd like to believe that is not existent, and extremely brilliant work is extremely brilliant work. It doesn't matter sort of whose name is on it, whether you're, a elite mathematician with, some name that everyone knows, or whether you're, say, a high school teacher in who knows where. Elite work is elite work. And I believe that this is sort of recognized in the math community, and that sort of at high levels the math community does a great job of this. But that's just my opinion, and maybe that's naive of me, but.
I think it's complicated. And I just want to say that there is, Bill Massey at Princeton, there's an example.
Yes, but not in the math department.
Okay, true that.
Yes. Yes.
True that.
Yes, I know Bill. Yes.
Great question, but we can talk more about all of that. Was there one more question?
Nope, that was it. That was the last question.
Thank you all for being a great audience.
Yes, and also one note, if you happen to be a Pomona student and you have a question for me that has not been answered, or there's a question you'd like to ask me but you're not comfortable asking in front of everyone, if you're a Pomona student, feel free. I think perhaps we'll call this, but they could come on stage, or they can come
out in the lobby.
Not on the stage, out on the lobby. If you are a Pomona student and you have questions, extra questions for me that have not been answered.
And one last thing, though. I want to just, before we applaud Mr. Urschel, I know you got some stuff from Harvey Mudd, but the math department, I know that people made fun of you for driving a little car and not a big fancy car. We're kind of the same. We're giving you a couple pencils.
Thank you.
They say, I love math, and there's a little kind of puzzle in there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, John. You're really an inspiration to us all.